Thank you, Mr. President. You know, the other night after about a 5-hour Judiciary Committee hearing, and yes, they can last 5 hours this time of year, about as long as this debate, I think, I decided to call my mom on the way home. And I was telling her about what was going on at the Capitol, and I told her about this bill, and she said, well, Brian, that's pretty simple, isn't it? And my mom knows I'm a lawyer, and so nothing's ever simple. And I said, Mom, it's a little bit more complicated than that. I won't go on to tell you the advice she gave me after that. But I can tell you this, when you get away from this bubble of this building, you get away from the signs out there, you get away from the emails, get away from the phone calls, you get away from the debates that we have here, maybe this issue is not really as complicated as we think. And there are two moments for me in the last couple weeks where I confirmed that voting for this bill was the right thing. The first was when 3 activists called me out to the ropes last week, and we had a great discussion. They were very kind people. And we started discussing this. Isn't this what this is really about is the value of privacy versus the value of life? And so I looked at them and I said, so tell me, do you agree at least with this point? At some point, the value of life outweighs that privacy. At some point, do you at least believe that? And two of them said, yes, I believe that. And they said, to us, it's the 20 weeks, it's the current law. I said, okay, that's fair. The third person looked at me and said, no. I said, okay. I said, we're going to have to disagree on that. But then what she said to me is haunted me ever since. She said, do you really want unwanted children? Think about that for a minute. Do we really want these unwanted children, these children we can't afford, children we can't take care of? You know, I don't know about y'all, but what really inspired me to get in politics was to fight for the unwanted, to give a voice to those that can't fight for themselves. That little guy, that's how I was raised. That's what makes me get up here every day, to fight for those unwanted people. And you really think about it, it's the foundation of our Constitution is standing up for the unwanted, those without a voice. It's the foundation of the faith that we all share, fighting for the unwanted, standing up for them. The second moment for me was when I got this book that's on your desk. And if you haven't looked at it yet today, please take a look at it. One of the great things, and also maybe the bad things about technology, is you can now really see what's going on with a pregnancy. You can see in that womb. And we start looking at valuing, as the courts have said, privacy versus life. I look at these pictures. Please look at these pictures. Look at 20 weeks. Then flip the page back. Look at 18 weeks. Look at 16 weeks. Look at 14 weeks. Go on back from there, all the way down to the beginning. And you tell me that the child at 18 weeks is less valuable than the child at 16 weeks. 14 weeks is less valuable. 12 weeks is less valuable. Go back to 20. Is that child more valuable than the one at 18? I can't answer those questions, because to me, they're all a child. And so all I can do is go back to where we say life ends, with the beating of a heart. That's the only place I know that I can draw this line logically. And as I was thinking about this vote today, you know, history a lot of times will tell us that one side of this issue is going to be proven right, one side is going to be proven wrong. Maybe history will say that both had some merit. I don't know where we'll go with this in history. But if I vote yes, and I'm right, the numbers say we may have hundreds or thousands more lives in our state every single year, more babies in our state. If I vote yes, and I'm wrong, and this was a wrong decision, statistics say this bill passes, we'll have hundreds, maybe thousands more lives in our state every year. I can live with that decision either way. Thank you, Mr. President. I'll yield the will.
Thank you, Senator. The chair recognizes the senator from the 43rd to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Senators. I rise today because I know that we are all concerned about ensuring that there is quality health care in the state of Georgia. When I'm not serving in the legislature, I am a minister and a life coach. Parishioners come to me often with their life stories. I listen without judgment to the stories of their life. Sometimes life that hasn't turned out the way that they expected. Last year, a woman told me she'd lost a child. A couple of years ago, my sister-in-law lost her child. Just Tuesday night, a woman told me she lost a child. Not through abortion, but through the lack of maternal health care. I grieve each life and each circumstance. It's not mine to judge, it's mine to pray. It's not mine to condemn, but it's mine to extend grace. We can disagree about abortion and agree on what gets us to optimal health care outcomes. My colleague spoke about maternal mortality, but I want to shine the light on the topic of infant mortality in the state of Georgia. As heartbreaking as it is to think about losing a child before their first birthday, Georgia ranks in the bottom 8 of states. I said Georgia ranks in the bottom 8 as recent as 2018, and 2018 was only 3 months ago. House Bill 481 will only add to the infant mortality rate. In our state, there are 3 reasons, only 3 that I'm going to name. 1, lack of access to care. 2, pregnancies that a woman would have to carry to term that should be terminated for lack of quality of life that the unborn child will have based on lack of early testing in the pregnancy. And those we cannot predict with circumstances the child will be born in that may place a child in an unsafe or an unhealthy environment. And all of these reasons have a remedy. It's called full Medicaid expansion. For clarification, the infant mortality rate is defined by the number of infant deaths per live births, and as of 2018, Georgia was estimated to have 8 deaths per 1,000 live births. Why would I focus on infant mortality when we are talking about banning abortion, you may ask? Because disparities persist across states, according to reports released by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention's National Center for Healthcare Statistics. It's simple. Infant mortality is as important is an indicator of a state's health as it highlights the level of maternal health, the quality of public health training and practices, ease of access to health care, and a woman or a family's socioeconomic conditions that afford her the ability to provide health care options for her family. So as my colleague stated, if we're given, God gives us choices, and it's not ours to judge, but ours to extend grace. Judge not, that you not be judged. For with the judgment you judge, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. And why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not consider the plank in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me remove the speck from your eye, and look, a plank is in your own eye? First, remove the plank from your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the will.
Thank you, Senator. The chair recognizes the senator from the 16th to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. Come here to speak on somebody who's not said anything, and that's the life of the unborn. He didn't get to weigh in on this. I have 6 children. All of those have come through C-section, and we've listened to the sonograms, and we've watched the heartbeat. We've watched the child work and move. And then I've sat in the operating room and I've watched the doctor with his skilled hands take that child out of my wife. And it is life. It is life from the time that heartbeat started to the time that it ended. Who will speak for them? They don't have a representative. They don't have a senator. But we are their representatives and their senators. I did a tour of a neonatal center in our local community. Walked through the unit. It was unreal. Millions of dollars spent. Babies in boxes, if you will, being treated. And I said, wow, this is absolutely awesome. I said, what's the youngest? What's the youngest that you've got? The nurse said, 22 weeks. And with 22 weeks, I said, wow. She had showed me where that child was. That was the diaper that went on that child. You could hold him in the palm of your hand. Someone chose for me. Someone chose for you. And I believe that we need to choose for those who cannot choose for themselves. Modern medical technology shows us things that are beyond. We can see that child move. We can see that child breathing. We can see a sucking of the thumb. The baby in the womb is a living person. It's his own creation. It has DNA. It has fingerprints. It has a soul. It's a unique human being. It has personhood. And that's what this bill seeks to do. You know, when we have an accident, if someone's hurt, injured, and there's a child involved that's not been born, there's personhood for that. When there's an attack on a woman, and if that child is injured or killed, there's personhood for that. And what this does, it allows personhood. Regardless of the circumstances that surround the conception, whether planned or unplanned, whether wanted or unwanted, the baby is still a person and needs to be protected. Here's a question. If it's not life, why do you have to take it? Why do you have to kill it if it's not life? When we deny that this is personhood of the baby, to take that life, it's wrong. It's interesting that right now we approach almost 60 million. We've been talking about cost and things of that nature. Our abortion nationally since Roe v. Wade was passed was about 60 million people. That's 6 times the population of Georgia. But imagine what that would be in productivity if they had been allowed the opportunity to live. 60 million. Maybe not all would be successful, but a great many of them would be. Now, in some states, we're seeing that abortion is going to infanticide. That's not acceptable. God has placed us in positions for such a time, I believe, as this, to protect those that are vulnerable, those who are defenseless, and those who can't protect themselves. I would ask this: let Georgia be known as a state where life is cherished and children are loved and they are valued. It's funny, we have many bills that come before this body and we say it's for the children. This is probably one of those bills that's for the children in a big way that is no other will have. It makes a difference on the children to come. I would ask for your support for this bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the senator from the 40th to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, there's no better way to learn about the electorate than by going door-to-door canvassing. And I did a lot of that during my campaign. Mostly, I just had friendly conversations with neighbors. But there's one story of meeting a woman along the campaign trail that really sticks in my memory. The woman who answered the door, she was about my age. She was a mom, a teacher, a Catholic. And she disclosed to me early on that she had historically supported Republicans. So I told her about my stance on health care, on public education, and on traffic congestion. And she had me shake hands with her disabled son. And I shared with her stories about how I had advocated for people with disabilities. I could tell that she wanted to support me, but something was holding her back. She finally said that she had never supported a Democrat before because of the issue of abortion. But recently, she didn't feel that she could support Republicans. And there I stood, a Democrat, knocking on her door. So, we talked about abortion. I explained to her how if Republicans were in charge, she could likely see some pretty big changes. She shared that what she really wanted was for abortion laws to stay the same. She didn't want increased access, but she also didn't want decreased access. Then she paused, and she said, "Couldn't politicians focus on other issues instead of abortion?" she asked. Yes, I said, I could support that. You see, what I learned through canvassing was that in my district, it's not enough anymore to just simply be pro-guns and pro-life to get traditionally Republican votes. The old rules don't apply anymore. People's views have changed. That mother I spoke with could see how deeply we in Georgia are failing our women and our children, how our infrastructure and limited resources are resulting in the preventable deaths of women who want to be mothers. But I don't see Republicans fully addressing these issues. Most mothers who are on Medicaid lose their Medicaid 6 months postpartum, but maternal deaths continue to spike in the second 6 months following childbirth, after they've lost their Medicaid. You see, people, the voters, they know the difference between being pro-life and just anti-abortion, between truly supporting mothers and babies by providing access to things like health care, and punishing women for the decisions they make about their economic situations. People recognize when laws are being pushed that play only to the most extreme views. Now, perhaps that woman that I spoke with might agree with the Benedictine nun, Sister Joan Chittister, who said, "I do not believe that just because you're opposed to abortion, that makes you pro-life. In fact, I think in many cases, your morality is deeply lacking if all you want is a child born, but not a child fed, not a child educated, and not a child housed. This nun continues, and why would I think that you don't? Because you aren't putting your tax dollars there. That's not pro-life, she says. That's pro-birth. My voters have asked me, why are Republicans not expanding Medicaid when our hospitals need the revenue to keep their doors open? Why are we keeping Medicaid reimbursement rates so low that doctors don't want to participate? Why are we not adequately funding our public schools? Why do we spend less money on people with disabilities than most any other state in the entire nation? Why are Republicans so unconcerned that House Bill 481 could result in even fewer doctors in our state available to deliver babies and care for pregnant women? Well, I think increasing numbers of Georgia's voters, especially female voters, are beginning to wonder the same thing. And thank God, women are voting and running for office more than we ever have before. I am here because I answered a call. So is Senator Karen Shack. So is Senator Jordan. So is Senator Williams. And come 2020, there will be more. And this bill, this hurtful, insensitive, not well thought out bill, is going to help elect more women, who will enact policies that prevent women from dying in childbirth and who will ensure that Georgia's children are fed, housed, and educated. Vote yes for this bill, and we're coming for your seats, because that's how democracy works. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Thank you, Senator. The chair recognizes the senator from the 23rd to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I hesitate to say anything. The hour's late, and I'll be brief. Abortion is a divisive issue. It divides families. It divides my family. And I don't expect to change anybody's mind today. I just want to explain my vote, why I support this bill. In 1979, I was in law school, and I studied, like all the other students, Roe versus Wade, which had just been decided a few years earlier. I agreed with the decision. It appeared to be well-reasoned. Supreme Court Justice Harry Blackmun wrote the main concurring opinion in Roe. When Justice Blackmun came to campus, I couldn't understand why protesters tried to interrupt him as he spoke to us on Law Day. But fast forward to Thanksgiving 1983. My wife and I were celebrating. We just learned that we were going to have twins, our first children. Their due date was March 31st of the next year. 2 days after Thanksgiving, in the middle of the night, my wife's water broke. We rushed to the emergency room at Phoebe Putney in Albany. The doctors wanted to send us back home for a miscarriage. We refused to leave the hospital. My wife held off going into labor for 4 weeks while we frantically looked for help. Finally, in mid-December, I called our family's doctor back in my hometown of Waynesboro. He told us about the Medical College of Georgia in Augusta and the miracles they were performing. The doctors in Albany discharged my wife with no medical transport, Friends drove us the 4.5-hour trek to Augusta. 2 days after arriving at MCG, my wife went into labor. The twin boys were born alive on December 16th. They were over 3.5 months premature. Philip lived for a day. Drew struggled for life. He weighed 680 grams. That's 1.5 pounds. We were introduced to the neonatal intensive care unit. Miracles were happening all around the ICU. It hit me then that most of the babies struggling for life there could have been legally aborted. Our son Drew was a second trimester baby, a 25-weeker. The law at that time allowed for abortions at that stage. This had a profound effect on me. These preemies were not pounds of flesh or growths or an appendix to be removed, but were living beings who deserved life. My view of Roe was completely changed forever. That was 36 years ago. Since then, our understanding of what it means for a baby to be viable has changed. Look at the pictures on your desk. This bill does not go far enough in protecting all unborn babies, in my opinion. It is a compromise bill. But we are in a movement for life. We seek to win over the hearts and minds of our people, and I believe that is happening. We're expanding services for expectant mothers. Last year we passed adoption reform. We have strengthened peach care for children's health. Someday, and I hope that day is soon, I believe our people will choose life. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 34th to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I do apologize for trying to get warmed up. You never gave me that nickel's worth of heat I've been begging for. I do rise to talk about my grandkids. Y'all know I like to come to the podium and talk about those grandkids. I got 4. I got 1 in college, 1 that's a senior in middle, and 2 that's a freshman in middle. Go figure. But I talk about them because without my children, they would not be here. And when my son reminds me, Mom, you didn't let us get away with a lot of that stuff, I say, aren't you glad I didn't kill you? Not literally, okay? But I make that point because my son, 45 years ago, was a 2-pounder. So if you want to turn in your little book, you can turn to see where the first 2-pounder is. That was my son. He's now 45 and a handsome fella, gave me 2 grandboys, and I'm so proud of him, I call him my favorite son. Of course, he is my only son. And my daughter, bless her little heart, she blessed me with a son and a daughter, my only grandgirl, and she is the prettiest thing on this side of heaven. And I tell you that because listening to all the testimony all afternoon, I think everybody's right. Why do I say that? Because everybody has an opportunity to make a choice they and they alone can live with. See, that's what my husband and I raised our children with. When the young man asked us for my daughter's hand in marriage, we politely said, should she say yes, that means she plans to live with you. We don't have to. I tell you all that because I've heard testimonies that gets into religion, and for all of my adult life, I've been in love with my one husband now, 42 years, be 43 in July, but we don't practice the same religion. I am a Antioch Baptist Church North member all my born days since I was 6 years old. But my husband, bless his heart, when he came across the Georgia line and picked a real Georgia peach, he couldn't go back to Alabama. But he was raised a Methodist. So we have a little bit of a challenge at times, but part of what we do is talk about it. But at the end of the day, when we were trying to raise children, growing up, we were saying, as long as they know we're not going to be here forever, we have to raise them to make choices they can live with. This bill is telling women to make choices they may not can live with. And therein lies the problem for me. This is America, land of the free. By passing this bill, you strip American women of their freedom of choice. Many supporters, lawmakers of this bill have utilized their own personal religion rather than scientific facts to prove the legitimacy of this bill. Choosing to let your own personal religious belief dictate everyone else's ability to have a choice, in my mind, is called dictatorship, and far from the American way. This is not an argument among pro-life or pro-choice, but rather an argument against women and their free will to choose. Many women are unaware that they are pregnant at 6 weeks, meaning for many, this bill will function as a complete abortion ban. In countries where we have banned abortion, abortions still remain a commonplace. Instead of operating in a safe area such as professional doctors' offices, many women are getting unsafe, illegal backdoor abortions to protect themselves. Georgia currently has one of the highest mortality rates, with African American women being 4 to 5 times more likely to die from during pregnancy or childbirth. This bill forces recent rape victims to make their attack public, so they are capable of receiving an abortion. It simply is inhumane and cruel. Atlanta ranks worst in the United States for income inequality, which affects women, children, and the LGBTQ community. HB 481 would make assessing a potentially life-saving reproductive health service nearly impossible for the most vulnerable Georgians. Protecting children, according to Adopt Us Kids, there's approximately 14,000 children in foster care in the state of Georgia. Instead of increasing the number by passing for HB 481, how can we help those children find loving, safe homes to prosper in. If you're truly worried about the lives of children, why aren't we attacking those children, 14,000 of them? Georgia does not teach comprehensive sex education. The failure of our education system to teach comprehensive and informative sexual education is what causes many unplanned pregnancies. Instead of stripping women of their right to choose, we can teach children to make better choices, choices that they will have to live with. Why is it a priority to remove health care options instead of supporting education programs that will improve reproductive health outcomes? This bill would force doctors to make an impossible choice, treat their pregnant patients, and risk jail time for endangering the pregnancy, or refuse to treat their patients to protect themselves and risk their patient's life instead. What are we doing today? We are sitting here consistently debating, going back and forth, when at the end of the day, we know only a woman can give birth. So why are we making decisions for women to make decisions that they are grown enough to make for themselves? We are not your property. We can decide what we can do with our body, and at the end of the day, if we can live with it, stay out of our business. Thank you, Mr. President. I'll yield the well.
Thank you, Senator. Chair would like to recognize the senator from the 27th to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the body. I would like to start this evening, I guess it's this evening, by saying I'm proud of us. I'm proud of the members of the minority party. I'm proud of the members of the majority party. We have had an intellectual debate. We've had a respectful debate. We've had an honest debate. For those of you in the gallery, no matter what side of this issue you're on, there's probably been 100 times throughout the course of the day where you've wanted to say something or yell out or clap or cheer, but you've honored the decorum of this chamber, and I would like to thank you for that as well. That is not lost on us, and we appreciate you joining us in our attempt to discuss this very sensitive, emotional, and critically important issue. This is a personal issue for everybody. We all have our own story. We all have our own values. I'm a father of 5. 4 of my children are living. One of them I never had the chance to meet. And my wife has had numerous difficult pregnancies. We spent 20 weeks in the hospital before our first. We spent a month in the hospital with our last in the NICU. And so each of us has had different life experiences that informs what we think about this topic. What we would all agree on is that the right to life is a paramount right. If any one of these members of the body were to get upset with me today and extinguish my life, we would all agree that that is an injustice, and we all would agree that they have done something completely un-American and something that goes against the morality of everybody in this room. We agree and we understand that the right to life is a right on which all other rights rest. It is a foundational right. If it goes away, every other thing that we talk about in this room is inconsequential. So really the only question today is, when does life begin? A secondary question to that would be, how do you know, or why do you believe that? And then maybe another important question with those two questions in mind is, what if you're wrong? When does life begin? How do you know? And what if you are wrong? To change the tenor for a quick second, there's a big lottery happening, the Powerball. It's at $650 million last I checked, and if you all don't see me here on Monday, you know why. But the odds of winning the lottery are approximately 1 in 300 million. And if any of us won the lottery this weekend, we would say it's a miracle. We would say it's something that's astounding. And we don't often talk about miracles in our life, and we've become so advanced as a species and as a society that we lose sight of the miraculous that's in front of us every day. And I don't know how many of us are in this room right now, probably 200, but I'm looking at 200 miracles. Senator, you are a miracle. Senator, you are a miracle. Sir, you're a miracle. Ma'am, you're a miracle. Each one of us is marked with humanity and marked with dignity and has the mark of exceptionalism stamped into our very DNA, and that's something that we would all agree on. A friend of mine tells it this way, and it's a pretty powerful story of the miracle that happened. And the way, Mr. Chairman, you're a miracle as well, and the way that it happened for you is the same way it happened for me. One cell from your mom and one cell from your dad met. And there's a little more to it than that, but we don't need to go into it in this body. But just the odds of the cell from your dad making it to where it made it was 1 in 250 million. And there's a lot of other miracles that happened before that and a lot of other miracles that happened after that. But when that cell met the other cell, each one of them was carrying 23 chromosomes. And they met and they joined and they formed a single cell that became what would become you. And there were 4 nucleotides that began a work that was a tremendous work. They set out and they wrote your DNA. Your DNA, Senator, is 3 billion characters long. There's never been one like it, and there never will be another one like it. If I were to read, Senator, every character that's in your DNA, and I read one character at a time for 1 character per second, I would die at this podium doing it because it would take me 90 years. There's never been anybody like you, and there never will be anybody like you. Your DNA determines your hair, your skin, your build. It determines what your height might be, determines what color your eyes are. And along with your DNA, it began to stamp out the uniqueness of you. It determined what your fingerprints were going to be, determined who your children, what they would look like. And you began to form something in the womb that had its own heartbeat, its own circulatory system, its own fingerprints. Everything about you was unique. The only difference between the you that was then and the you that I'm looking at today, the only difference is nourishment and time. So when we go back to the foundational questions of when does life begin and how do we know it and what if we're wrong, I believe that the only fair conclusion, if we want to honor the foundational right of life, the only conclusion is that we need to honor life at conception and that we need to honor life in the womb the same way that we honor life here on earth. Because I'm not smart enough, and I don't know that anybody here is smart enough, to draw a singular line in the sand and say at 19 days and 6 weeks, you are not life, but at 20 days, 20 weeks and 0 days, you have life. When you are beginning the process, when my wife was beginning the process of giving birth, my daughter did not have rights, but the minute that she came out of the birth canal, all of a sudden she had rights. It's too confusing for me to figure that out. I think it's too risky for us to begin to try to figure that out. Article 1, paragraph 2 of the Georgia Constitution has been referenced today. I'm going to read it again for us. And it says that protection to person and property is the paramount duty of government, and it shall be impartial and complete. No person shall be denied the equal protection of the laws. So what this bill does, it's been discussed already today. It is a personhood bill. It establishes the rights of people in the womb, and there's been conversation today about maybe we should do this and maybe we should do that, but it is the job of legislators to make that decision. And it's a hard decision. For those of you that disagree with me, I don't hold it against you. I think you've made some very compelling arguments today. I think you've made arguments from the heart. I think you've made arguments from the mind. And I think you've adopted an intellectual position that you believe is correct. And I respect that. There's been a lot of talk about maternal mortality rates. And Georgia does have a problem. We lose, depending on the year that we look at, we lose between 40 and 60 mothers, either in the process of being pregnant, the process of giving birth, or in the process a few days after giving birth. And we had a scary situation in my own experience with my wife where it got hairy there for a minute. And I would like to begin to paint a picture, and I want to paint a picture with a gumball. And if we can, I know this is a little difficult to do, but if we could cram in our minds every ounce of humanity and every ounce of love and every ounce of dignity that those 40 or 50 or 60 women have, if we could let a gumball illustrate them. They were mothers, they were sisters, they were daughters, they were entrepreneurs, they're scientists, they're musicians, they're politicians, they had dreams, they had fears. There's a lot that we're going to try to capture in this gumball. And this body has dedicated a tremendous amount of time, intellectual resources, and financial resources into recognizing, honoring, and trying to protect the dignity of every woman that we represented with this gumball. The senator from the 45th, wherever she is, has done a fantastic job of leading the charge in this issue. I'd like to thank her for that and for every one of you that have been a part of that. It's something that we take very seriously. If you'll give me a second. So if we can.
Senator, please stand at ease for a moment. For what purpose does the senator from the 48th rise?
Point of parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
I refer the president to Rule 8-1.10, usage of audio-video equipment, visual aids, Section B, which I have brought to your attention, and I ask for a ruling on that, please, sir.
It's the interpretation of the chair to 8-1-10B. Sentence number 2, all visual aids shall be consistent with the dignity and decorum of the Senate. If this visual aid does not match the decorum of the Senate, I will call it out of order. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. So we have here something that we would all hold very dear, something that we would all say is worth protection. And if we come to the conclusion after asking those 3 very important questions, when does life begin? How do we know? And what if we're wrong? And if we come to the conclusion at that point that life begins in the womb, then I would like to bring another illustration to the table. And the senator from the 45th, if you don't mind assisting me with this.
Senator, please stand at ease. For what purpose does the senator from the 48th rise?
Mr. President, it was brought to my attention this morning that we can't have more than 1 senator at the well. And again, my continuing objection to use of the visual aids that are not graphs and charts and consistent with the dignity and decorum of the Senate. Continuing objection.
Thank you. So recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I believe that this is worth protection, that this is worth expenditure of our intellectual resources, our financial resources, and if I believe that this is tragic, I also have to come to the conclusion that this is worthy of our protection, our intellectual resources, our financial resources, and everything else that we would say that we hold dear here. I know this is a tough issue. It's a difficult conversation. And ultimately, it is something that we all have to decide for ourselves. But for me, I have come to the conclusion after science has told us more and more what happens in the womb, after I have studied what the Constitution tells us is the paramount right, I have come to the conclusion that this is worth protection as well. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Thank you, Senator. The chair recognizes the senator from the 26th to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President, and ladies and gentlemen of the Senate. I guess we've been here about 5 hours. I look around, 17 years ago, exactly 17 years ago, Republicans took over the General Assembly. And it was a wedge issue. A marriage is between a man and a woman. A marriage is between a man and a woman. It went through the churches, all through communities, and this General Assembly changed. It was done in the entire Southeast. Here we have another wedge issue. You know, I like songs. Music has always been something that tells me what has gone on and what's going on. You know, if Marvin Gaye was here today, he would talk about what's going on. If Bobby Bland was still here today, he'll talk about there's a rat in my house. If Marvin Cease was still living, he would be talking about starting all over again. If Teddy Pendergrass was here, he would be talking about wake up, everybody. There's no more sleeping in bed. There's no more backwards thinking, only time for thinking ahead. Now, I've heard, and I guess it's emotional to a lot of folks. First of all, I don't know a man that's sitting in here that can have a baby. But we're going to dictate to women what they can do with their body. How would you like for them to start dictating what we can do with our body? But yet we can talk about these things. I've heard you talk about getting married young. Well, I got married when I was 19. Dinner board. Took her to school. Finished on time in 4 years. All my kids, all my boys played professional football. Daughter married a professional football player. So I'm the father of 4, grandfather of 16, and great-grandfather of 3, with some more on the way. And here we are talking about a wedge issue. Now, many of you have been called downstairs and your arm about to fall off. You need a sling to put it back in place. It passed by 3 votes in the House. I've been here a long time, and I guess I've seen a lot of things. I've seen folks come, and I've seen them go. And after this vote today, there's going to be some more that come and go. It's time that we understand that women have the right to make that choice. Now, can I be mad with them if they make the choice that I don't like? I guess I make some choices that they don't like either. But we are here today to talk about what they can and can't do with their body. With their body. It is insane If you look at Washington, Judge Kavanaugh is on the Supreme Court about this same very issue, trying to get it to the Supreme Court. But a lot of you today don't want to vote for this bill. You don't want to go home and face the Me Too movement. But somebody has pulled you, and somebody's got your arm bent behind your back. I don't know if some of you are going to take a walk or you're going to go down the Penrose path. And that's on you. We're going to disagree. But today, we ought not be the ones to tell women what they can do with their body. And when you look at that bill, how do you determine in the first semester who baby it is? How do you determine the father? You know, we normally determine the father by what they call legitimization. You go to the hospital, draw some blood between the two parents, and then determine about the, I guess, chromosomes or whatever, if it's your baby or not. And it usually comes back 99% that it's yours or it's not yours. So I just wanted to say this because I've seen all the men walk down there and do all the talking about what ought to happen with a woman's body. Remember, you know, that shoe could get on the other foot. And they will be coming out here talking about what the men can do with that body. So think about it.
Thank you, Senator. I'd like to recognize the senator from the 6th to close debate on the minority side and speak to the minority report.
Senator Lucas is a hard act to follow. And I'm going to strike a little bit different tone because I am a woman and I am here to speak for myself and for all the other women in this chamber. You know, we didn't seek this fight. I didn't run for office to fight the culture wars around choice. Our state currently has some of the most restrictive abortion laws in this country. Yet abortion is safe and legal. And this uneasy truce that we've had on this issue in recent years should have held. But our current governor, who claimed to want to move Georgia forward, is pushing this cruel, punitive, and regressive bill that's only going to hold us back. You know, I don't doubt the conviction of some in this chamber. However, a deeply held conviction does not allow one to adopt a view counter to scientific and legal fact. And let's talk about facts. Currently, Georgia's law, abortion law, outlaws abortion after 20 weeks gestational age. This despite the fact that a baby born at 20 weeks cannot survive outside of a woman's uterus. And yes, I said uterus, not womb. Paraviability, also referred to as the limit of viability, is defined as the stage of fetal maturity that ensures a reasonable chance of extrauterine survival. With active intervention, most infants born at 26 weeks and above at this point in time have a high likelihood of survival, and virtually none below 22 weeks will survive. All of this is consistent with the stories we've heard today. So this is the current state of the law. No abortions over 20 weeks. This is the current state. So how does this bill change the law? It will now effectively ban all abortions before an embryo or fetus is viable outside of a uterus and before a woman or girl knows that she's pregnant. We keep talking about 6 weeks pregnant. You know what that means? That means that maybe the woman is about 1 to 2 weeks late after an expected menstrual period. And yes, I am talking about stuff I don't want to talk about in this chamber, but let me tell you something. If you're going to get into the most private areas where women are, then you're going to have to listen to it. This has been a legal line in the sand since Roe v. Wade and Casey, and every single decision to come out of the United States Supreme Court over the last 45 years. Decisions that sought to balance the fundamental rights of women with those of the state in protecting potential lives. Once that potential life reaches the point of medical viability. You know, throughout this process, I've been floored by the scientific inaccuracies peddled by the radical interests pushing this bill, and I'm going to say it. This whole idea, I've heard the same thing over and over and over. And I was like, man, that's interesting. Much of what's been said today is part of this whole packet that was put out by National Right to Life about what to say, how to frame your message. I could go line by line and pick out exactly what some of the speakers were saying. The willingness to completely disregard the physicians in this state, and the complete lack of respect for and trust in women, mothers. First, let's start with the science. You're putting into law that the state of Georgia now legally recognizes all fertilized eggs, zygotes, embryos, as natural persons in this state entitled to the rights and benefits of any other person. Who knows what a zygote is? Counter to all medical experts, the law also attempts to establish that a zygote, an embryo, a fertilized egg, at 5.5 weeks has a beating heart. This simply is not true. At the earliest stages of pregnancy, certain embryonic cardiac activity can be detected with a transvaginal ultrasound. I don't think any of the men that spoke today have ever had a transvaginal ultrasound. I have. And it is not pleasant. Every physician has said that the fetal cardiac activity present early in pregnancies is not a beating heart, and no matter how many times you say it, no matter what you call this bill, it does not make it so, even in these precarious times where people think they can just repeat stuff, even though they know that it's inaccurate. And if, in fact, this was nothing more than political pandering, you could not have exceptions to the abortion ban based on who supplied the egg and who supplied the sperm to create the embryo. You all know that. Cruelest of all, to demand that a victim of incest file a police report before being able to terminate a pregnancy at its earliest stages is horrifying, or that of a victim of rape. Each of you sits here in judgment of a situation that you could never comprehend and dictate what a woman can and cannot do with her body, with her life. But let me tell you something, this bill takes it much, much further. For the first time, this state will make Georgia women criminals for seeking basic reproductive care. This bill subjects both the doctor and the woman to prosecution and imprisonment for up to 10 years. Any woman who suffers a miscarriage could be subject to scrutiny regarding whether or not she intentionally acted to cause that miscarriage. She would be at risk of criminal indictment for virtually any perceived self-destructive behavior during pregnancy, which could cause miscarriage, to wit, smoking, drinking, using drugs, using legal medications, driving while under the influence, or any other dangerous or reckless conduct. And taken to its extreme, prohibitions during pregnancy could also include the failure to act, such as the failure to secure adequate prenatal medical care. Any issue of whether a woman who has participated in this risky behavior intended to cause her subsequent miscarriage, as a lawyer, I can tell you it'd be a jury question. In other words, a pregnant woman who suffers a miscarriage could be could be subjected to criminal investigation, indictment, prosecution, long before a jury is asked to determine whether she intentionally did anything to cause the loss. And if you think that everything I just said was exaggeration or hyperbole, I read it directly from a Georgia court case where the implications of prosecuting women for seeking abortions was laid out in no uncertain terms. Today, Senate Republicans ignore precedent, medical experts, women, and the OBGYNs in this state, the very physicians whose whole job it is to deliver healthy babies and to keep women healthy. If you want more healthy women and babies, if you want to care for women and babies, if you value life truly, you would listen to the people who dedicate their lives. This is what they do. But instead of that, not only are they ignored, but they have been threatened and told to stand down or face cuts to, let me be clear, because we heard it in the beginning, cuts to maternal health funding, family planning funding, rural birth centers, all the things that we said we were funding. Yeah, there have been threats. You know what? Voters have a right to know the lengths to which members of this body will go for politics. And let me be clear, that is what a woman has a right to know. This is cowardice. Let me tell you how it feels to be a woman and a mother of a daughter whose reproductive health this body now claims as its own. My husband and I were talking about this bill the other night, and he told me that he didn't want me to share anything personal because no one was entitled to that information. And I have always fiercely guarded my privacy. But let me be clear, the deepest, darkest times of my life have occurred in the presence of and with my physician. You see, I've been pregnant 10 times. I have seen what many of you in here have called a heartbeat 10 times. But I have only given birth twice. I have lost 7 pregnancies in varying points of time before 20 weeks and 1 after 5 months. Her name was Juliet. I have laid on the cold examination table while a doctor desperately looked for a heartbeat. I have been escorted out the back door of my physician's office so as not to upset the other pregnant women in the waiting area, my grief on full display and uncontainable. I have been on my knees time after time in prayer to my God about my losses. I have loved each and every single one of those potential lives, and my husband and I have grieved each passing. But no matter my faith, my beliefs, my losses, I have never, ever strayed from the basic principle that each woman must be able to make her decisions in consultation with her God and her family. It is not for the government or the men of this chamber to insert itself in the most personal, private, and wrenching decisions that make every single day. And that's not some smiley, happy statement that's been focus grouped. That is the reality of our lives. God chose women alone to be the fiduciaries of life, not government, not this body. My experience wasn't about abortion, but it is what's at stake here. It's about the fundamental right to privacy of women. Matters such as a woman's ability to decide whether to terminate a pregnancy involve the most intimate and personal decisions a person can make. At the heart of liberty is the right to define one's own concept of existence, of meaning, of the universe, and of the mystery of human life. The mother who carries a child to term is subject to anxieties, physical constraints, to pain that only she must bear. And someone came up and said, who speaks for the unborn? Who represents the unborn? I will tell you, their mothers do. What gives this body the right to substitute its judgment of that of the entire medical community of this state? What gives this body the right to substitute its choices for those of the women who will no doubt bear the scars, the consequences, and who will face death, and now likely prison? Who gives this body the right to substitute its will, to override the Constitution of the United States? Each of us took an oath to protect, to uphold the Constitution, to heed established constitutional law. This oath should mean something. Because without the rule of law, we have nothing. And let me be clear. If you shirk the most basic duties you have to protect the fundamental rights of women today, then no doubt the women of this state will reclaim their rights after they have claimed your seats. I yield the well.
Thank you, Senator. Chair, for what purpose does the senator from the 48th rise?
Point of parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
I note for the record that during today's debate, when the members of the opposite party were at the well, I and others pushed our buttons to speak at all times and were not recognized, and I would like to supplement the record with the questions I would have asked had I been given the opportunity.
It's the chair's opinion that each of the senators have yielded the well and did not take questions. Thank you. This time I'd like to recognize the senator from the 45th to close debate as the sponsor of the legislation.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, thank you very much for this debate on a divisive issue and the respectfulness shown by all of the viewpoints. The Senate has always risen to the occasion, and I know we have some House members in here, but I'm so proud of us. It is important for every voice to be heard. That's why I'm speaking now and am joined by many of my colleagues with the same passionate convictions. We are speaking for those without a voice box. They can't be out there in the hallowed hallway shouting the shouting that we hear now. We are speaking for them. We speak for the unborn child. We have awakened a sleeping giant, watching New York and Virginia state laws change. The silent majority is now awake, alive, and ready to protect the unborn. I ask you to join me in voting yes on House Bill 481 and speaking for the children of Georgia. I yield the well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. For what purpose does the senator from the 48th rise?
Court of Parliamentary Inquiry.
State your inquiry.
I would like to correct the record. There has not been any shouting in this chamber. No one has shouted as the senator stated in her closing remarks.
So noted. The question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? Chair hears none, and the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass by substitute? The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 34, the nays are 18. This bill having received the requisite constitutional majority is therefore passed by substitute. Chair would like to recognize the majority leader.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate stand adjourned until 10 o'clock on Monday, 25 March.
Will the Secretary read the announcements?
Mr. President, there is a Rules Committee meeting in 450 of the Capitol upon adjournment. That concludes the order.
Any senators wish to make an announcement? The majority leader has moved that the Senate stand adjourned until 10 a.m. on Monday, March 25th, 2019. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes clearly have it, and the Senate stands adjourned. Have a great weekend.